Morning,
Morning.
everyone.
Good morning.
Good to,
Morning.
good to see you. Shana Tova. Once again, wishing you a good new year. And as I think I may have mentioned it when we were talking about the high holidays before, wishing everybody Gamar Chatima Tova, may be sealed for a good year. That is a fairly common and fairly common sentiment, certainly, and a useful greeting that we can make certainly until through Yom Kippur. So, anyway, so good to see everybody. And as I indicated last time, it's time to talk about Shabbat. Now that we went through fall holidays, Shabbat is sort of the next thing to tackle, and I figured this is going to take at least a couple sessions. We'll see where the discussion takes us and where we need to go, but hopefully this will be hopefully that'll be a sort of a good way to start.
Rabbi, can I ask
Rabbi.
a question?
Yeah, sure.
It just dawned on me during Rosh Hashanah when we're reading from the Torah that Simchat Torah in 14, 15 days from now is when we read the last passage and then flip back over and read the first. But yet at Rosh Hashanah, we're reading from the beginning of the Torah. So is that purposely because Rosh Hashanah, we have to have a certain message, or is it written in the Torah twice?
What?
Okay. Well, it is, the answer is the former, right? I mean, that we are trying to get across a certain message for Rosh Hashanah. What Mark's referring to is the idea that on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we read from Genesis chapter 21, and then on the second day we read Genesis chapter 22. Those refer to the passages that are the final two tests of Abraham. And Abraham, I mean, in the second of those stories, the story of the binding of Isaac, is obviously a famous or infamous story, depending on your perspective. Um, and there are a couple of reasons why we do those particular readings there. First of all, you have the story of the binding of Isaac, the fact that that Abraham winds up taking a ram to substitute instead of sacrificing Isaac, he sacrifices a ram, and so the ram, being corresponding to the ram's horn, the shofar, there's a correspondence there. Um, there are other interpretations why we read those particular passages on Rosh Hashanah. One being that, um, uh, Abraham is commonly known as the first Jew. And whereas, God makes a covenant with Abraham over the course, from pretty much from the beginning, pretty much almost from the moment that we meet Abraham for the first time. Um, God says, "Hey, you're my guy. I'm gonna, I'm gonna give you these blessings. I'm gonna give you X, Y, and Z." But then the story of the relationship between Abraham and God extends over the course of basically 13 chapters. So, yes, God chooses Abraham, but it's not, but it takes a while for their relationship to solidify. And you could say that with Rosh Hashanah, every year we kind of, we still are uh, noting our special relationship with God, but we have to renew that every year. We need to I guess, what you might say in some professions, we need to do some continuing education in order to make sure that everybody's still on board. So those are a couple of different interpretations, and there are probably plenty of others that I'm leaving out. Um, one thing that I want to emphasize with, when you're talking about, relating Rosh Hashanah with Simchat Torah, um, indeed, we are reading from the book of Genesis, but not the very beginning of the book of Genesis on Rosh Hashanah. And sometimes begs the question, you know, this the idea that we say over and over in Rosh Hashanah, today the world was born, right? Today is so why aren't we simply reading Genesis chapter 1, verse 1? So a couple of different theories on that. One is that we want to reserve the end of the cycle and beginning of the cycle of reading the Torah for its own day. If you can, I mean, for those who have experienced both Rosh Hashanah and Simchat Torah, imagine if we combined them. It would be it would be chaos. It would just be and we'd be there all day. I mean, it would be it's too much. But I think also the idea that I want to suggest is that Rosh Hashanah, I mean, we say that Rosh Hashanah, today the world was born. There are many interpretations that say that the first day of Rosh Hashanah is not the anniversary of the first day of creation. Rather, it's the anniversary of the sixth day of creation,
Okay.
right? And the idea is that Rosh Hashanah is not the anniversary of when God says, "Gosh, it's dark in here, let there be light." Rather, it's when God says, "Let's make human beings." And so, in that sense, it's the beginning of the relationship between human beings and God. So that's one basic, those are a couple of theories regarding why we separate the two. Excellent question. Okay. I think I may have heard somebody else trying to ask a question. I don't know if you want to jump in or add a comment.
I was just gonna apologize. I don't know what's wrong with our camera, but if I put it on, turn on the camera, all we get is black. So, you see what I mean?
Yep. Okay. No, no worries. No worries. Listen, I mean, happy to have you with us on camera, off camera, whatever you like.
I'm too old to know about computers, so I don't know how to fix it.
Not a worry. Not a worry.
You need a kid for that, yeah.
Yeah.
No, while we're apologizing here, I just want to make this really quick. Nothing to do with Shabbat, but on Rosh Hashanah, I came in through the handicapped entrance, and I really have to apologize for coming in during the Amidah.
Oh,
The door opened and I didn't know what to do, and I probably should have just stayed there near the door, but it wouldn't close if I stayed near it. And then Mary Linda started talking to me, and my husband had said, "Make sure you get books for both of us." Of course, I didn't realize the books were already in the pews, and I kind of panicked and went looking for books. And I thought, "Oh my God, I shouldn't be walking around during the Amidah." But anyway, I felt bad about that, so I just wanted to say I won't do that again.
okay. Okay. Listen, look, I mean,
It was just,
we'd rather have you there.
no, thank you.
We'd
But
rather have you there.
I
It's all
felt
good.
like I had done something wrong.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I think everybody has those moments where we walk into a room and suddenly it's like, hey, everybody's looking at me. Oh, yeah, yeah. So,
Right.
by the way, what I always find funny, and this actually kind of brings it back to Shabbat, um, there is so there's a prayer during the Friday night services it's called Lecha Dodi, in which the custom is that when we reach the final stanza, we stand up and we face the back of or the entrance of whatever room we're in. So when you do that in a synagogue, oftentimes, you're facing the place where people walk into the room, walk into the sanctuary. So every once in a while, it's like, and we're like, Boichala, Boichala, come in,
Yeah.
bride of Shabbat. And every once in a while, some guy kind of walks in and he's like, oh, I'm the bride of Shabbat. Hey, okay, okay. Wasn't expecting a full, welcome or whatever it is, but okay. So it's all fun. Okay. So, okay, Shabbat. It's a huge topic. And what I decided to do, and I mean the titles of these sessions, I kind of I make sort of preliminary titles and then maybe I change them afterward because on YouTube at least, because Yeah, I think we're going to be talking about one basic thing. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, whatever the case may be. Um, I called this Shabbat saying yes. And the thing I want to emphasize is that it is very easy, especially when we begin the journey of making Shabbat a bigger part of our week. There is a tendency to be overwhelmed. It's a very understandable tendency. There's a tendency to feel overwhelmed because there are many restrictions as far as what we're supposed to do on Shabbat. There are many times where it's like, okay, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do this, etc. I'm not denying that those things, that those don't do this, don't do that. I'm not denying that that's out there. And we do need to talk about it to some extent. But what I want to emphasize is that Shabbat is also a time where sometimes because we can't do some things, we are better able to do other things. And what I want to talk about is the idea of the positive commandments of Shabbat. In other words, what we get to do because of Shabbat, not yet about what we can't do because of Shabbat. And I think the more we emphasize what is possible rather than what is impossible regarding Shabbat, the better experience it is. Um, so, so I want to kind of start with that basic idea in mind. And what I want to do is to kind of walk you through, at least chronologically, what we get to do on Shabbat. And by chronologically, it may be very easy to say, okay, I'm going to start Friday night, right? Shabbat goes from Friday night to Saturday night. I'm actually going to start at the beginning of the week because part of what I think a very large part of what makes Shabbat special has to do with the preparation we make. The better prepared we are for Shabbat, oftentimes the better experience it is. Now, I'm not saying that every moment of the week needs to be, all about preparing for Shabbat, but um, there is a rabbinic teaching that says that if you go to the market on, let's say, Monday, and you find a really nice fish, right? Very nice fish at market that you can buy to cook. You find a nice piece of fish. You say, okay, I'm going to take this piece of fish and I'm saving it for Shabbat because it's really nice. And then if you go back to market on Wednesday and see an even better piece of fish, you say, I'm going to get this piece of fish and save this for Shabbat. And the one I got earlier, I'm going to have it during the week.
Yeah, cook it today.
Because I want the best stuff. I mean, Shabbat should be for the best stuff. This is assuming that refrigeration was reasonable at the time, but okay. Anyway, but you get the idea, right? The best Shabbat we reserve for the best things. And which goes to basically a basic idea that we are continually separating Shabbat from the rest of the week. That however we observe Shabbat, the idea is to make it unique and to make it just, even if you can't necessarily make everything a touch better, you can at least make things unique for the day. The Torah teaches to both remember Shabbat, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, and shamor et Shabbat, to guard Shabbat in order to keep it holy. But holiness, as I think I've mentioned here at some point, holiness is also really the idea of separation. We are separating Shabbat from the rest of the week. Now, all of this is not uh, to downgrade the importance of the other 6 days of the week. Honestly, I think that the more we can accomplish during the other 6 days, the more special Shabbat can feel. So we have so the rest of the week, it's really important to make of it what we can. And then Shabbat is the icing on the cake, if you will. So that's a couple of the bits of theory regarding Shabbat. And now we can go into a little more about what the preparation is. Now, I have here, let's share this real quick. All right. This is something that I got, I got this off the internet. And keep in mind here that, again, I'm not, this I would say is a checklist for the time leading up to Shabbat. Now, I want to say at the very beginning, some of these observances are, I would say, of the strictest kind of observance. So I don't want you, do not take this literally. Do not take everything in this literally. Some of the things that they have on here, some of the items like cut up toilet paper and disable dishwasher and things like that.
Oh my goodness.
Those refer to a very, very strict, and I would say not entirely necessary observance of Shabbat, in my opinion. If people want to do this, it's fine. But the idea that I want to suggest at the very least is that you're supposed to, leading up to Shabbat, make things, for lack of a better word, make things nice. All right, so what does that mean? It means, for instance, that we want to make it so that we have, for instance, good food on Shabbat. So the idea is to prepare it, before Shabbat starts. There is the idea that, if possible, to bathe and to get into nice clothing leading up to Shabbat. There is the idea to, if possible, to clean that which needs cleaning within the house. Right. And a lot of people like to, get fresh flowers if that's something that really enhances their day, right? They'll get, fresh cut flowers. They'll get, and they'll get certain items to make everything look nice. There is a rabbinic legend that every week there are two different celestial beings that look at every Jewish home just before Shabbat begins. And one of these celestial beings is an angel, and the other one is the opposite, whatever you want to put it. And the idea is that if they look into the house, and if they see that everything is just chaotic and everybody's fighting with each other and everybody, and people are, things aren't prepared and just everybody, it's just everybody's in a bad mood or whatever it is, the negative angel will say, may it be like this for this house every Shabbat. And the good angel is supposed to say, Amen. However, if the house looks nice, clean, there's lovely food being, cooking, people are dressed well and clean, and everybody's excited for what will happen, the good angel says, may it be like this for this house every week. And the negative angel is supposed to say, Amen. So those are some things that we do leading up to Shabbat. Another thing that a lot of people do is they give tzedakah. They give money to charity leading up to Shabbat, even if it's a trace amount, even if it's pocket change or what have you. The idea is to say before Shabbat begins, we're going to just give a little extra to those in need, to set aside money for Shabbat. I'm not saying you have to necessarily make an online donation or anything like that, but a lot of people have in their homes a box, like a little piggy bank, if you will, that we call, it's a tzedakah box. And that's where, a lot of people put, loose change or maybe a dollar bill or whatever it is. And so there's a custom to do that before Shabbat begins. Any questions about preparation for Shabbat?
Yeah, there were one of the mitzvah toys,
Oh, the bit about muktzah toys. Okay,
whatever it was. Yeah.
yeah. So that I'm going to talk about the idea of muktzah when we talk about the don'ts of Shabbat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a look, it's a category that I would say is um, eh, like it's a stricture. Is it too much of a stricture? It depends on your perspective. But it is, I mean, uh, you think of it this way. Um, my feeling is if if one's kids, for instance, if they're, the rest of the week they're playing on their, Nintendo or whatever it
Okay,
is.
it's toys with electricity.
Right. That's a
Oh, okay.
technical.
I didn't
Yeah.
know what it was. Okay.
Yeah. That's the technical definition of it. But
Okay. Now I understand. I just didn't know the
sure.
word.
Yeah. Muksa is a, specific sort of halachic, word having to do with specific Jewish law. But yeah.
My Orthodox cousins would never, ever, ever play with, no.
Right. I mean, there are some who would never play with Nintendo the rest, or the rest of the week.
But definitely not on Shabbat. Now I understand. Okay. I
Yeah.
just didn't know
No,
what the word meant. Yeah.
no, it's all good. It's all good. Okay. So there are a couple of other there are a couple of things I forgot in terms of preparation. And it leads into the process of the Shabbat dinner. Now, Shabbat services for Friday nights take place sometime in the evening. Some synagogues they time it according to when we get close to sundown. So it literally changes every week what time Friday night services take place. Um, our synagogue, along with many others, basically say, you know what, we're just going to have like one uniform time so that everybody can remember and people aren't going to get, confused. So so at Heskamuna, we have Friday night services at 6:30 p.m. every week. I mean, maybe like there's an exception here and there in terms of the time, but we have it every week. Now, the way things currently are is that every week we offer them via Zoom. Um, they usually only take place in person when I'm in town. At least that's how it's been over the since I've started working there. Might that evolve? It might evolve. I don't know. But at the very least, but even when it's in person, you can still log in on Zoom. So that's always an option there. Um, Friday night services are usually around an hour long and they're quite beautiful. in terms of the music, in terms of there's a lot of singing. It's very it can be very enjoyable. Um, what oftentimes makes a Friday night particularly special for people is having Shabbat dinner of one sort or another, having a special dinner. Now, what makes something a Shabbat dinner? Well, ideally, like I mentioned earlier, it's having good food, right? Food that might be particularly special. But that's not the absolute, like as you absolutely have to. Um, Sometimes if you're in a pinch, you do what you can. Let me explain what I mean. When I started, when my family, my parents and my siblings, when we started doing Shabbat dinners regularly on Friday night, it was actually that started after my bar mitzvah, right? Until I was 13, Shabbat dinner for us was not a regular thing. We started doing that after my bar mitzvah. And I remember my mother saying, every Friday night, we're gonna do Shabbat dinner. And whenever possible, it's going to be, really good food. Um, it'll be like chicken or fish or, turkey, whatever it is. There might be Friday nights, I remember my mother telling me, where we just don't have our stuff together. Like every once in a while, it's going to be a rough week. And it may be that on a Friday night, we're going to have to just order pizza. And, but we'll still say blessings and we'll still be together. And I've always taken that idea to heart, right? That do what you can to make Shabbat special, but, you know, we're not, we're humans, we're not robots. I mean, we can't always, you know, be completely in a Shabbat mode. We have to forgive ourselves. Um, so, the idea is to, whenever possible, to be together and to say certain blessings. And let me share a graphic that talks about the things you are blessing. For some of you, this is going to look very familiar. For others, this might not. Um, these, I would say, are the three main elements of what make a Shabbat table a Shabbat table. You have the candles, you have a goblet that which we say blessings over wine or grape juice, and then you have challah. So let's talk about first of all the candles. The idea is to light candles, at least two. There are plenty people who light more than two, and to light candles as close to candle lighting time as possible. When is candle lighting time? Candle lighting time is 18 minutes prior to sundown of wherever you are. Now, you might say to yourself, all right, well, when is that? Well, it completely depends. It depends on where you are geographically, and it depends on what time of year it is. As you know, sundown, it is totally dependent on the time of year and the location. There are a lot of ways to find out in your pretty much exact location when candle lighting time is. There is a wonderful website. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it yet. It's called hebcal.com. That is HEBCAL.com. Hebcal, that's short for Hebrew calendar. And at hebcal.com, they have a lot of different things. But one of the things they have this little, sort of search engine, if you will, in which you can put in I think exact location, or at the very least, you could put in your zip code. And it will tell you when Shabbat candle lighting time is this coming Friday night, next Friday night, a random Friday night 10,000 years from now. It will tell you when you're supposed to light the candles.
Rabbi,
Yes.
it may just be me, but it's really difficult to go to a Friday night service, whether it's 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and like you got to pick one or the other, because if you're supposed to have the Shabbat dinner at sundown, well, you can't get to synagogue on time. You have to either skip it or go to synagogue. It's like a choice.
You know, it's a dilemma that this is a somewhat familiar dilemma for a lot of people, and you're not wrong in acknowledging that it can be tough. I do think that a lot of people um, oftentimes make a choice. They do one or the other, and the last thing I would do is to, if you want to do one of those two things, the last thing I would do is to say, oh, well, you have to do both, or nothing at all. I understand that it can be a challenge. What some people do, depending on their, I mean, oftentimes it also depends on what your schedule is on Friday. Some people might have more flexible schedules, some people don't. Um, and for some people, um, there are a decent number of people who say, you know what, if services are at 6:30 p.m., I'm going to eat at 5 on Friday nights and then try to do services. Or some people, have the habit of, or don't mind eating dinner later. It depends on what your specific needs
Well,
are.
that's what I do, but it's like it sure ain't sundown if you have to eat that
Sure.
early to get to synagogue.
No, it's true. It's true. Shabbat, you can bring Shabbat in early. That's one of the hidden things. You can bring Shabbat in early. Now, by early, I don't mean like, oh, it's 10 in the morning on Friday. Oh, let's bring in Shabbat. Well, maybe not. But there are plenty of people who do bring in Shabbat, on the early side in order to be able to experience all these things. So I would say it's certainly not unprecedented to do it that way. Again, it depends on what your specific needs are. And uh, I, I think a dilemma that many synagogues have faced is the question of, when do we schedule Friday night services? Is it too difficult to make the service completely dependent on when sundown is week to week? Is that too tough for people to remember? Is it too tough for people to get in that habit? Is it better to have it every week at the same time? And if so, what time are you going to pick? Um, eh, Different synagogues have different answers to that, and part of it depends on where you live. There are communities, there are conservative synagogues in certain communities where they make their Friday night services at 8 p.m. every week. Why so late? Well, in some places, let's say if you're so when I was in New Jersey years ago, in northern New Jersey, a lot of people commute in and out of New York City for work, and they're not going to get back until 7 o'clock or 6:30, 7 o'clock. They're not going to get home until then. So to have Friday night services at 6 p.m. would be, like there's no chance. But if you make them at 8 p.m., okay, then they might have an opportunity to. The flip side of that is, then you deal with families of young children who say 8 p.m. My kids are in bed at 8 p.m., or at least I'm hoping they're in bed by 8 p.m. How in the world am I supposed to ever have them come to Friday night services with that? we play with different things. Different synagogues play with different things depending on the needs of the community. And that's why, I say in general, 6:30, I mean, is a time that I think a lot of people at Heskamun are used to. Does that mean that that's what it always needs to be? It's going to depend on what the congregation needs. Um, and I would say that about any synagogue. This is not a specific comment about our synagogue. So, though those are good questions. Um, so candle lighting, 18 minutes before sundown. Um, if you are lighting, if and then you might ask the question, well, what if I'm late? The nice thing about this 18-minute rule is that whenever Shabbat candle lighting is, the 18 minutes are really kind of a buffer zone. So let's say candle lighting is at 6 p.m. on a particular Friday night. It means that if you're running a little late, you have until 6:18 to actually light the candles. So it's kind of this neutral zone that you can play with if you need to. Um, why are we so intent on lighting candles when we are? It comes down to one of the very few things that the Torah actually tells us about how to observe Shabbat. The Torah itself tells us next to nothing about what it means to observe Shabbat. But one of the things it tells us is that you can't light a fire. So the idea is that the Shabbat candles, that's the time where you can light a fire just before Shabbat begins. And so but lighting Shabbat candles can be another way to, really beautify the day. So that's one element of Shabbat at home. Another element is that of the wine or the grape juice. That is known as Kiddush. Now, you may have heard me use the word kadosh or kodesh before. Those are all words that refer to holiness. Kiddush is just another derivation of that root word. And so the idea is that we say Kiddush in order to sanctify the day. By saying a prayer over wine or grape juice, what we are saying is that we fully accept and acknowledge the holiness of this day. There have been times when I've been in somebody's home on a Friday night and they've said, "Oh, we should make Kiddush, but I forgot to get wine or grape juice." You can actually say Kiddush on pretty much any drink, except for maybe water. Um, you can even say the words of the Kiddush over challah if absolutely necessary. Because certainly the idea is to drink something that, by tradition is something, enjoyable. But it's whether or not you're actually having wine or grape juice is not necessarily the point. The point is to say the words that we are acknowledging the holiness of Shabbat. Um, so anyway, that's regarding Kiddush. Now, okay, challah. Challah is what makes bread challah. What makes bread challah is that in some point um, during the baking of the bread, there is this expression of challah is taken. What does that mean? it means that when you take it, when you if you were to bake challah, you take a little bit of dough and you set it aside and actually ideally burn it. And that is our way of sort of saying that we are, uh, we're taking a little bit away from our dough, and saying that we give this back in a sense. That's what it means to take challah. Now, if you buy kosher challah at a store, um, by seeing that it's kosher, you are fully aware that um, at some point in the baking process of however many loaves this bakery or this factory made, at some point a little bit of dough was taken away. That's how we know it's challah. Um, as to the actual makeup of the bread, it's pretty much based on custom. Challah is oftentimes eggy bread. It is oftentimes braided, where they take certain pieces of dough. We take like the dough into like three long strands and then braid them together. Um, I would say that challah is probably for kids the the favorite part of Shabbat. I would say that like if you were to take a poll of little kids who celebrate Shabbat in one way or another, odds are 90% of them are going to say what's their favorite part? It's challah. Um, and the idea is to say a blessing over challah. On Friday night, we say a blessing over 2 loaves of challah. Why 2? Because they're just trying to get you to buy more challah. That's why. No, no. The reason why you have to say a blessing over 2 loaves of challah is because in the book of Exodus, when it describes God sending down manna, right, the food that the Israelites would eat during the 40 years of the wilderness, essentially for those that time, basically food literally rained down, and that's what the Israelites ate for 40 years. Um, well, Friday, so Saturday, it's like, it's Shabbat, right? I mean, it's God's day of rest too. I'm not gonna, busy myself sending down manna. So what God would say is, I'm gonna send a double portion of manna on Friday so that you'll have enough to eat Friday and Saturday. Saying a blessing over the 2 loaves is a commemoration of the double portion of food that the Israelites would eat. The Israelites would gather on Friday so that there'd be enough food for Shabbat. Now, does that mean that every Friday night you have to eat and consume 2 entire loaves of bread? Not necessarily. There are many people who will say a blessing over 2 chalot, 2 challahs, but only eat from one. What I typically do in my home, especially if it's me and let's say my kids, is I'll say a blessing over the challah. I'll say a blessing over, like a regular size challah loaf, but then I've also got a challah roll that I keep in the freezer, and I just take it out every Friday night. We say a blessing over that, and I put it back in the freezer. Is that cheating? No, it's not cheating. It's I mean, unless you know that you've got a group of people at your Shabbat table that are going to eat, that where you're going to need that much challah. Okay, then obviously you should get 2 loaves. A lot of people don't buy challah. A lot of people bake their own challah. Um, I am somebody who am completely incompetent at baking anything from scratch. I can bake from a mix, but not from scratch. I'm not good at it at all. I know that there are plenty of people who are good at it, and if you are, I would encourage you to make your own challah. I think it's a lot of people really love that, and sometimes people will bake their own challah, um, like, they'll bake like a bunch of loaves in one session, and then freeze the other ones that they're not going to eat that week, and take them out for different occasions. Um, but if you're looking for store-bought challah that's kosher, um, and anybody can feel free to jump in terms of what's available in Knoxville. I know Trader Joe's usually sells kosher challah. I'm pretty sure Whole Foods does as well.
What is
Whole
Kroger?
Foods has it, and they're terrible.
Okay,
All the Krogers have kosher challah.
they do. They do. I
And
think.
BJ's does too in
Yeah.
Maryville.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So there's a bunch. All right. So there really are more options than I thought. So that's really great.
Yeah.
So there have been, yeah, I mean, I think it's something that more and more places are selling. Um, and yeah, people could do very intricate chalot. They don't have to be the same size. They don't have to necessarily have the same shape. I mean, you can do a lot of things with it. The one in this picture has, sesame seeds on it, but I mean, people have put on, like like the everything bagel topping, people have done that. There are a bunch of things you can do with that. Um, they, so yeah, so there's plenty you can do. But now the other thing that you might see is that, why is this bread covered up in this picture, right? Why? And there's this, lovely cloth that's over it, that if you look at the Hebrew letters, on that cloth, it says Shabbat. But why is it covered in cloth? Well, there's this tradition that when you are at the Shabbat table, when you are saying blessings, right? You say blessings over candles, you say blessings over the wine, but the last thing you do before you start eating is to say the blessing over the challah. And there is um, a traditional explanation, which um, is that challah is that you have to cover the challah because you don't want the challah to feel bad that it's the last one. So you cover it up so that when you remove the cover, you have, the challah has no idea that it was the last one. They think it would be the first one. Now, a comedian, friend of mine, somebody I grew up with in Denver, named Noah Garden Swartz, did a fun routine about how um, only Jews are so are going to be this obsessed about the feelings of their baked goods. Um, but it's so it's just kind of a nice thing. But having a cover for the challah, it's another opportunity for Hidur Mitzvah. It's another opportunity to make Shabbat, a very pretty and visually attractive thing. So having a lovely cover for your challah, it can be kind of nice. Um, let's see. I do want to touch upon a couple of other things having to do with what happens at the Shabbat table. In terms of traditional food, I mentioned that thing about what my mom said about, like, every once in a while, if it has to be pizza, it has to be pizza. True. But what are some things that people traditionally have on Shabbat? Oftentimes, look, if it is a meat eating household, I would say that it's pretty common for it to be meat, chicken, turkey, briskets, any number of things with that, with sides and all that stuff. Um, Obviously, if one is a vegetarian or vegan home, there are other things as well. Some people do fish. Um, Plenty of different things that you could potentially do to have for Shabbat dinner, but the idea is to make it a nice dinner. In terms of other blessings, there is a custom that if you have at least if you have children, and if at least one of those children are at your Shabbat table, to say a blessing for the children. And that blessing originates from the end of the book of Genesis when Jacob said a blessing to two of his grandchildren, Ephraim and Manasseh, and said that from this point forward, there will be blessings said to our sons that say that may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, thankfully, there's also, we want to say a blessing to the females as well. So the tradition then was established to say also, may God, for girls to say, may God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, the four matriarchs of the book of Genesis. Um, there's a custom to do that. Another custom is to say, is that if and this one is kind of a patriarchal custom, but it is this idea that if a man is married to a woman, that he is going to sing a song to his wife from the book of Proverbs, from the end of the book of Proverbs, which is known as the Eshet Chayil, which is a poem that describes, a righteous, what is a righteous wife? What is a good wife? And it describes all the things that a good wife is. Um, there are people who, really take a lot of joy in doing that. There are others that do not say that because, for various reasons. First of all, they might not be in they might say, look, we're a household of equality. Why does only the guy sing to the woman? And in some cases, you're looking at you're looking at a different kind of household in which you have maybe two men or two women, or any combination of things. When I was married, my wife and I at the time decided that we wouldn't sing it because we just thought it reflected a certain inequality. And that was fine with me. I didn't, that was okay to not do that. Some people do that and do so with the utmost respect. I'm not trying to say that this poem is necessarily misogynistic. I mean, there are a lot of people who do it with, great love and sincerity and respect. So that's another thing. And other people have proposed um, other poems that may reflect a more egalitarian sensibility. So different customs on that. When I was married, we just skipped it. It was fine. And there are other customs that when you're at the Shabbat table, that you're supposed to linger. You're supposed to, sit and enjoy and talk, and also to there are customs where people sing songs at the table. Songs, some of them are specific to Shabbat, some of them are just songs that are just sort of typical Jewish songs. And it's also many times people do the grace after meals, which is known as Birkat Hamazon. We can talk about that when we get into more into prayer in general. But it's customary to sing it and to sing it with a lot of joy. It's a really if you did the full Birkat Hamazon, it's pretty long, and usually there are a bunch of different tunes within this blessing. I like to refer it as the Bohemian Rhapsody of Jewish prayer, because there's just a bunch of different things, and it's also very typical that when like when people learn it, for instance, at Jewish summer camp or Jewish day schools, there are a number of jokes that people tell or jokes within the song. They'll take certain words and make little puns out of it, or they'll do little hand motions or other things. It can get kind of it can get a little unruly if you don't control the crowd well enough. But it can also be really part of the fun. Um, we're nearing the end of our hour today. So I guess what we'll do is I'll continue on the sort of the saying yes theme when it comes to Shabbat, and talk more about Shabbat as sort of as a day as a whole. In other words, we pretty much just talked about Friday night today, so we can go on and talk about what things are like on Saturday, and how you conclude Shabbat and all that. So we're going to continue on this saying yes theme next week. In the meantime, Yom Kippur takes place Wednesday night to Thursday. And for those who are able to join us at services, either in person or online, I look forward to seeing you, or to be with you at least in some capacity. Wishing all of you an easy fast if you are physically able to fast. If you are physically able to fast, a reminder to try to hydrate the day or two before. Make sure you have extra water or electrolytes or whatever it is you do to hydrate, and to try to avoid salty foods the day before, because that's only going to make you thirstier during Yom Kippur. And I'm wishing you a meaningful experience, and we'll do this again next Sunday. We'll meet at 10 a.m. next Sunday. So I hope everybody has a good week.
Thank you,
I have two
Rabbi.
questions, Rabbi, if you have time.
Sure. Go
you-
for it.
The symbolism of salting the challah and
Yes.
also washing the hands. And when you have to, the tradition of staying silent until a certain point.
So I'll take this one at a time real quick. The idea of salting the challah, it's similar to when you live in snowy climates and you have to salt the roads beforehand. You need to make sure that, no, I'm not kidding. The salting the challah it is supposed to be a remembrance of when there would be incense or salt or different spices or what have you to for the sacrifices in the temple. So it's a recalling of that. During these times of the fall holidays, typically instead of doing salt, we do honey, because of the sweetness of this time. Regarding washing one's hands, so there is, and again, we'll talk about more of this when we talk about prayer, but there is a custom, if you're going to eat bread, that beforehand you do a ritual hand washing prior to that. And then when people do that, there's a custom that nobody should say anything until somebody has said the motzis, has said the prayer over that. Why is that? It's because the ideal is to from the time that you say the blessing over the washing of the hands to the time that you say the motzi should be like one prayer. So by not saying anything in between, you are, you're basically connecting the prayers, because those are the two things you're saying, and you're not saying anything else in between. There have been there are plenty of occasions where people have, in that space in between where people have looked at each other going, I mean, it can be quite entertaining. So, but yeah, so those are a couple of the details behind some of the Friday night things. So
You.
good questions. Okay.
I
All
have a
right.
couple also. I don't know if you could
Yeah.
stay after. Or
I mean, if it's specific to Shabbat, I mean, I can keep the Zoom going, and
it
it's okay.
is.
Yeah, sure. And if people need to go, that's fine. But I'm happy to keep it going.
My wife is gluten free.
Mm,
So what? And I was thinking, we used to live overseas. We lived in Vietnam, and I know there was one synagogue in the city at the time, but I didn't know anybody that who went. Uh, can you use like rice instead, or does it need to for sure be bread, or what do you
I know
think?
the answer to this question.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Kara, go for it.
It has to be 50% of one of the grains, so I would suggest oat. The flour has to be 50% of one of the 5 grains, and seeing as though all of the other ones are gluten, oat is really the only one you can use. So the flour inside
So
of it has to really be at
oat
least
bread.
50%. Yeah, so you can use other flours with the oat. It just has to be at least, I think it's 51% of the dough has to be made up of one of the 5 grains to be hamotzi eligible.
Okay.
I had to do a lot of research because I was making gluten-free challah for the synagogue.
Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
rice, it can't be rice or no.
yeah. Right. Yeah, yeah.
I
Right.
mean, you could,
Yeah.
the other 48.9% could be rice flour if you wanted it to be, but it has to be at least 51% of the 5 grains. So
Okay.
that's what, hold on, help me, Rabbi.
It's oats,
Wheat,
spelt,
oats, spelt, rye,
rye, and I'm forgetting. I'm blanking on the
bulgur.
other. Yeah, I think
Is it
bulgur.
bulgur?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My other question was about the timing.
Mhm.
Um, we're just not good at it. We're trying to figure out how to get everything. I think we're not in the habit of getting our preparation done like the day before.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I will, and this is just me, I'm having to run to the store Friday after work and try to get, in wintertime, there's just, winter we have to do something different because it's too early.
Winter's hard. Winter's hard.
But
Yeah, yeah.
but trying to figure out if for example, last Friday, I was almost done and I'm looking out the window and I'm like, oh, it's getting dark, with cooking. Do you have to be done cooking before it starts or?
You are. I mean, that is one of the that is one of the ideas behind it. So, what my mom would do is I mean, there'd be times where she'd be going to work, all day Friday, and would come back and essentially, like Thursday night is when she would do the bulk of the cooking, and she would set it up so that, like the chicken was already done and the potatoes were already done and just, in casserole dishes ready to be, stuck in the oven for, to either be microwaved right before or warmed up. Sometimes like if she's just, steaming broccoli or something like that, you put the broccoli in the pot with in the steamer basket and just, and just do a little bit last minute. Um, but yeah, I mean, look, and please understand, this is not me saying, oh, you need to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, this is really just hopefully helpful tips
Yeah.
to make it easier on you. Um, that's where I think preparation, kind of like trying to think about how to
Yeah. I
manage
need
that
to
preparation well.
set an alarm on my phone, like on Wednesday or something. It's like, do something,
Yeah, yeah, I would.
buy the
Yeah.
food, on
So
Wednesday.
I have a lot of times where I end up having to work or I have obligations that I keep frozen roast in the fridge. So I will go to the store and buy a couple of roasts. I'll cook them, put them in the freezer, and then on those days that it's super crazy busy and I can't get to cooking, I will just throw it in a pan and heat it up from the freezer.
Hmm. Okay.
I would also say, that, at the look, obviously Shabbat, is, I mean, part of it is that it's a sanctuary of time, and we do want to keep the time as best we can. But my feeling is like if you're running late, I think better to still have better to do, it's not like, okay, you know, it's dark and okay, now you can't do any Shabbat.
Yeah,
Still better to do something.
do
Still better.
something.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, and work on the time as best you can. But it's not like it's not like, okay, if you're 20 minutes past candlelighting, then it's expired and don't bother doing anything.
What about candle lighting early? Like if you're going to try to make a 6:30 or 7 o'clock service at a synagogue, you're eating when it's still light.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the idea is that it's kind of considered sort of bonus extra Shabbat, which can be nice. Can be nice. Yeah, and I acknowledge. I mean, look, there was a Shabbat I spent in Edmonton, Canada, in late June.
But then,
Okay, Shabbat ended around 11:30 at night. So we started at around 7 on Friday. And yeah, it was a little weird walking home from Friday night, services and dinner at 10 p.m. and it's still, completely bright out. That was weird. But then the hard part was the next night where it was like, it's like 11 p.m. and we're sitting there playing cards. Like, when can we end Shabbat? I'm going to bed. I don't know how people do it. It's hard. It's hard, but yeah. So I mean, that is sort of the extreme event. With all due respect to my Canadian friends, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but it's not like that all the time.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
All right, very good. Well, I appreciate the extra time. We'll see you next time.
all right. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank